Welcome back. In the last video, I showed you how to create a single state workflow. Specifically, we changed the preferred payment method from nothing to MasterCard. But that's a pretty simple example of a workflow. In this case, we're actually going to edit that workflow to make it a little more realistic. And in the course of doing so, I'm going to show you a lot of the other parameters for workflows. So let's take a look at this. So first, let's navigate back to our workflow. So we go to workflows, and now we're going to click here. And you'll see we have all our workflows available. So if I scroll through, we had this default payment method. So I'm going to click edit on that. That was the workflow that we created in the last video. So we're back to our prior workflow. So we have the preferred method, payment method up here, and we're going to click on that. So I'm going to double click on that. It's going to pull this back up. So we have this set field value. So let's click on that. And we're going to go to the top here. So we saw this window in the last video, but now I'm going to really walk you through each stage here. So the first thing you have is this state. So we're in that box, right? And this box was called preferred payment method. And within that box, we have one action, but we could have many actions. And so we're in one particular action in this case, and it tells us what type of action this is. So it's set field value, right? To remember back, this is the sales order, and we had the billing payment method. That's the field that we were going to be replacing. So let's add to this scenario. Let's say, because setting just blanketly for all customers to default to a certain payment method, that's pretty unrealistic. What would be more realistic is certain customers have a preferred payment method. So if you have customer ABC, that customer might have as their preferred payment method Visa. So if you generate a sales order with that customer, you want it to not be blank on the payment method. You want it to default to whatever their preferred payment method is. And that's going to automate in the background. So that's what we're going to set up here. We're going to modify this existing workflow to match those new requirements. So if we do that, and just to give you a concept of how that's going to work, so in this sales order, as soon as this customer field is input with a customer, so customer ABC or DEF, whatever customer gets selected, it's going to look on that customer record. We have one right here, customer Divavu. And if I scroll down a little bit here, I have a preferred payment method is Visa. So this customer has that selected and other customers do as well. So depending on what that customer's preferred payment method is, it's going to grab that field and it's going to place it within this sales order under payment method as the default. So that's how we're going to build out this workflow and edit it to be a little bit more realistic for our purposes. So now that you understand the scenario, let's start walking through these fields and what they mean for this action. So first off, we have trigger on. So if I click on that, we have actually a bunch of different options. And the difference, you can scroll down, there's quite a few there. The difference between these various triggers, and really what a trigger is doing is it's saying, when is this action gonna go into place? When is it gonna actually start? So you can see entry, before record load. A lot of these things, the differences are quite subtle, and really where you'll get into choosing one over the other will be in instances where you have a much more complex workflow, or you have a workflow that's working parallel to a script. And you really want to make sure that the order of certain actions is being done appropriately. Maybe the script has to do certain things before the workflow can do certain things, etc. For such a simple workflow that we're making here, really, there's not a lot of options, or you have a few that you could choose without making much of a difference. And I'm not necessarily talking about this exact one, but just a single state workflow. If I choose entry or before record load, it would have a very similar action in the end. Both are basically saying as soon as you're starting up that sales order, clicking it and bringing it up, it's going to basically already have, before the user can even see what you're interacting with, it would have done the action. So for example, if I click before record load, notice I have these event types here. So it's basically going to specify before, and in this case, record means the sales order, right? So before the sales order even loads for you, in what instance are you interacting with this sales order? Are you making a copy of a sales order? Maybe you're creating a new one, in which case the one that we have open, that would be a new sales order. Maybe you're just editing an existing sales order. You can specify what event you want selected for the record before it's loading. So in what scenario is this record loading? And then in that case, is this thing going to trigger? And keep in mind, I explained this in a previous video, when you're walking through a lot of these steps that you're gonna see here in this upper section of this action, a lot of these things are basically specifying kind of a true false. Are we moving forward or are we stopping at this point? So is it before the record loads? Okay, good, it is. Okay, but is it for a creation or is it for an edit of a record? You can click on and specify one. If you don't click any, it will default that it's all of them. So basically anything you're doing with a sales order, as soon as it's loaded, it will have already done this action in the background. So that's fine, but actually for what we're trying to accomplish with this preferred payment method, we're actually gonna need to select a different thing, which is after field edit. And before I click that, notice in the top right over here, we have this section. I'm gonna show it in a section, but it's the trigger client at the top. Notice that's a disabled section, but as soon as I click after field edit, notice this is now active, but I don't have an event type because it doesn't matter what the event type is. Now what we're dealing with is what's the triggering client field. So we're specifying that you're already editing a field and now the action is going into play. So to understand why that's occurring, if we want to set this payment method to the client's or customer's default preferred payment method, what we're going to do is we're going to first have to put in the customer before the workflow is going to know who is it drawing from. So we want it to enact or trigger once that customer has been selected. So that's the customer is the field that we're going to have as a trigger. So if we go back here, we said after field edit, and the after field edit is going to be customer. So we're going to need to specify here that field is customer. So we are going to go from the body. In other words, in this sales order, this is the body main section. If we wanted to specify a field that's down below the subtab or sublist area, we would select sublist here, but we don't. We want the body, and we're going to select here customer. Okay, so we've now selected the type of field, right? That customer field. And as soon as that thing is edited, it's now this action is going to go into play. So then before we go any lower here, I want to point out context over here. So in context, in most cases, you'll see selected 37 of 39. We have all of these different contexts except for 2 that are already selected. And basically what that's specifying is really, as it says, what is the context in which we're dealing with this workflow? Is this for a specific type of thing, or is it just in general? And it will default to more just in general. But one way that you can use workflows is really to solve a specific problem that you're running into. For example, if you're dealing with CSV imports, you're pulling all these records in, you might be running into a problem with that, and you're trying to create a workflow to solve that exact problem. In which case, for that context, you might want to specify, you might want to unselect all of these and just go to CSV import. So now it's only going to affect those CSV imports. Or maybe you have a problem with e-commerce where the web store that you have set up, it's not interacting right, or some field is not interacting the way you want it to. You might want to just select that to solve that exact problem. In this case, we have a broader perspective that we're trying to accomplish. So we're actually going to leave the default of all these different contexts. Next thing I'm going to show you is the condition. So condition is, again, it's just another gate that we're passing through. We're narrowing down what are we interacting with, when is it interacting. We haven't even said what we're going to do to the record. We're simply specifying the parameters or the bounds in which it can operate. So for this condition, in this case, we want to, if we're going to be changing what the preferred payment method is, we need to make sure, or we really want this only to interact with instances where the customer does have a preferred payment method, because it might not be a field that's included with specific customers. So we can actually add that as a condition. So again, this action is just limited to those customers who also already have a preferred payment method. So the way we do that, we have 2 options. One I'm going to show you. The other one is a custom formula, and that's really where you're going to actually type in the exact script that's going to run. But again, that's if you know programming. If you don't, which I assume in this case you don't, we're going to go to this box here. And if we hover over this, we can click open. And this is going to open what's called the Visual Builder. It's relatively straightforward. The key thing you're going to put here is the field. So the field in this case that we want to interact with is, if we go back here, customer, we see this preferred payment method. That's the field that we want to set as a condition. So what I'm going to specify here is that field, right? So first off, where is the field coming from? Well, it's coming from a customer record. So I'm going to go customer. I'm going to select that record. And then I'm going to select the field. So the field is called preferred payment method. The parameters that I'm dealing with is if the customer has a preferred payment method. That's the condition that we want. So we want to make sure that there is something there, and they take it from reverse. They say it's not empty, which is kind of a double negative, but basically it's saying that something is there. It's not empty. So we're going to select that, and we're going to add that condition, and we're going to hit save. So we've now specified, and it gives us the condition here, we've now specified that, again, at this level of the gate, we're only going to deal with the customers that do have a preferred payment method already set up. We do also have this save search condition. Basically, that gives you a listing of all save searches that you have within your NetSuite. And a save search already has criteria as part of it. So you can select a save search, and it will add that basically to whatever the conditions are for the action that you're doing. In this case, that's completely unnecessary. Lastly, we have schedule. You might remember back in the previous video, I went through it very, very quickly, but you can either set a workflow to occur on an event or on a schedule. In the vast majority of cases, you will want it to occur on an event. And that's in this case, for example, the event that we're doing is we're pulling up a sales order and we're selecting a customer. That's the event that is occurring. A schedule is obviously when a schedule is occurring. The instances are very limited where you'd want it to be on a schedule. For example, I've seen it happen where if you want to maybe flag all customers that have spent, let's say, $500,000 with your company, if you want to flag and make a record of all the customers that fall into that field, instead of, and also set up so that an email gets sent to you or a relevant staff member that shows those customers, instead of sending it for an email for every single customer, you could set this up as a schedule so that maybe once a day or once a week, it finds all the customers that fall in that category. It basically bundles it up. It goes, okay, these are all the customers that have now sold over 500,000, and it would send an email at one time, and you would specify the exact schedule. But again, very limited use case. And if you do have a use for it, by all means, use it. But in most instances, you'll just go with event. So we're not going to get into that. And it's disabled because of the way that we set up this workflow being based on an event. So now that we've set all of those things that are limiting the kind of scope of this workflow and this specific action, now we're going to specify, well, what are we actually interacting with? So we already had the field set up, right? Payment method. But now, instead of doing a static field where we just set it as MasterCard, we're going to set it more dynamically and connect it, do a join to a specific field. And the field is going to be customer, right? So if we select customer, and then the field that we want to deal with, it gives us the one custom field that we had for a customer, which is preferred payment method. So just to clarify, again, it's going to look at the customer, any customer, based on this action that we're pulling up with a sales order. It's going to search if they have a preferred payment method. If they do, if it matches that condition, it's going to take that field and it's going to go to the sales order and it's going to replace payment method with that field. So we've now got everything set. We're going to hit save. And then we're going to hit save again. We're going to say, yeah, we really want it to go. So we're still a single state workflow in this case, but now that we've done this, let's actually see if this worked. So I'm going to refresh this sales order. And I'm going to put in this information. Now, this customer that we specifically were looking at was Devavu, but we could do any customer. So we're just going to go with him for now, Devavu. So it automatically fills in certain fields like the subsidiary, etc. And if we go down to billing, notice the payment method is now Visa. Visa was the preferred payment method for Devavu, the customer. So as you can see, this workflow, which we set up, we hit save, and then immediately it's in action because the workflow is set up as released. And you can see it worked successfully. You always want to test these things to make sure they're working, but that is the basic concept, and that's a more realistic use of a workflow. And that's it for a simple single state workflow. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to create a multi-state workflow. So I'll see you in that video.